I know that I'm not alone here today when I say how thrilling it is to have Judy Grahn here to read to us. And the Pratt Feminists are also really excited and supporting this event. Bree will be introducing Judy in a moment. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the club. Pratt Feminists were involved in a lot of activism around both reproductive rights and also anti-sexual violence, and also doing a lot of other amazing things, collaborations with other groups on campus, and a lot of different things are going on. And to tell you a little bit more about some of the specifics that are, if you're interested in getting involved at all, I'm going to invite one of our founding members and the current vice president of Pratt Feminists, Sam Bork, to come up and tell you a few things. I definitely want to invite anybody who's interested in even just coming and seeing what it's about to come to one of the meetings. Mondays at 8, Willoughby Hall, 17th floor lounge, and Sam will tell you some more about some of the things that are coming up.
Hi guys. Okay. I'm the vice president of Pratt Feminists. If you didn't know that was a thing, that's a thing. We do a lot of activism. One of our big projects is on Saturdays we go out to the Choices Clinic in Jamaica, Queens, and we help escort women into the health clinic because there's a lot of anti-choice protesters, and they sometimes get a little harassy physically, verbally, and it's kind of traumatic for some of the women and even children in the neighborhood at large, walking around that neighborhood. So we go and we help out with that. This month, since it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we are doing a Take Back the Night on April 25th at 7 p.m. Well, 7 p.m. we'll start our sign making, and then 7:30 we'll start the march. On April 24th, we will be helping with Seaboard with a human trafficking forum. A speaker from GEMS will be coming to speak with us. And on April 23rd is the human trafficking. April 24th, we'll be having an open mic, helping out with an open mic. So you should all come to those events. They're going to be really great. So we are Willoughby Lounge, Monday nights, 8 p.m. And we'll also be tabling on April 14th around lunchtime. So come find us there, and you can get on our email list and find out more about choices and volunteering with us. You should find us on Facebook, on just Google, Facebook, Pratt Feminists. We have a group on there. We'll add you to it. We'll have a full calendar up there. You'll also see advertisements. We're getting advertisements printed up for the events. So, yeah.
So I'm Rachel Levitsky, and this is
Bree McCain.
And we're going to co-introduce Judy. So I'm a little bit bursting out of myself with excitement to have her here, to be honest. It's been a sort of lifelong desire of mine to hear Judy read and meet Judy, and I've been circulating around, I don't know, my class got it, and I'm circulating around the campus the poem, A Woman is Talking to Death, which for me, when I read it when I was in college, I think implanted the seed, which would only come up much later in action, to be a poet. So you can see why I'm this excited. So I have wrote a few comments about the poem. It's a poem which I say without question made me a poet, in the sense that it is a poem that delivers for me all that matters in the world, equal parts inquiry and the certainty that is required to take deliberate action into that inquiry. That is a poem as vehicle between thinking and making, a vehicle that allows, to quote Julie Patton, make and do, and also doing. Judy Grahn, quote, is a lesbian and a dyke and a lifetime homosexual. One is tempted to say that it's no longer the big deal it once was when Judy was isolated in her barracks for 3 months and subject to a huge investigation in which she and everyone she knew was interrogated about her sexual crimes by the military. But Grahn, by stating this, asked the question, how do we know the meaning of such words and their limit and their consequence before first saying them, publishing them, etc.? In her latest book, A Simple Revolution, Grahn seamlessly addresses the gaps in the historical critical record. And in addition to telling her own story, she really addresses this sort of critical gaps in literary history as well. Critical record of cultural revolution in lesbian feminist politics, writing, publishing, while simultaneously holding to a question that persists for her since her earliest consciousness as a writer, thinker, feminist. For example, what would it mean if the world loved women? And implicit in Judy's life's work, what can we do to find out? Here's Bree McCain.
It is a privilege to be introducing Judy Grahn. She's a renowned feminist, lesbian writer, and cultural theorist whose writings help fuel the gay and lesbian activism and second-wave feminist movements. Her work bridges the gap between second-wave feminism and avant-garde publishing. She's political and theoretical, a theologian who takes a holistic approach to her writing. As a professor in the Women's Spirituality Master's Program at Sophia University in Palo Alto, California, and co-editor for Metaformia, an online journal of menstruation and culture, Judy Grahn takes on multiple roles in present culture as more than just a prolific voice in queer feminist literature. She's an active leader and participant in the culture she has helped to define and uncover for generations. She writes with a pride and a power that is not just of herself, but from and for queer female population of her time and of the past and future. She writes with the hope, but also with a steadfastness that resists the bending and breaking of societal pressures. Her writing rejects patriarchal definitions of womanhood, promotes self-definition for women, and delves into the complexity of women's lives. She writes, I'm not a girl, I'm a hatchet. I'm not a hole, I'm a whole mountain. I'm not a fool, I'm a survivor. I'm not a pearl, I'm the Atlantic Ocean. I'm not a good lay, I'm a straight razor. Look at me as if you have never seen a woman before. I have red hands and much bitterness. This to me is an anthem of womanhood. It stirs within me something deeply instinctual, fills my areas of personal shame with pride, and calls me worthy. It is the core of herself, or any she herself, that defines female being, whatever that she self might be. This poem says to the person within, I'm not just an 18-year-old artist, I am the art itself. I'm not just a girl from the south side of Pittsburgh, I am the whole world of women. I'm not just a person who lives between 3 rivers, I am the convergence of culture, the voice of my essence, the meaning of my being. I have power, and Judy Grahn gives me the knowledge that I have it. Not every poem is so prideful, some just state facts. You are what is female, you shall be called Eve. And what is masculine shall be called God. And from your name, Eve, we shall take the word evil, and from God's, the word good. Now you understand patriarchal morality. But still a voice is used that is both universal and individual, that is inherently powerful because she is calling it into existence, forcing our collective voice into being and destroying the idea of our powerlessness. Her epics fill the space that heteronormative male-dominated literature left vacant for centuries. They take our otherness and make it into reality. Judy Grahn has published 8 chapbooks, 3 poetry collections, and 2 book-length epic poems. Of her 4 nonfiction books are Another Mother Tongue, Gay Words, Gay Worlds, and Blood, Bread, and Roses, How Menstruation Created the World. Her most recent collection of work is The Judy Grahn Reader, and her memoir is A Simple Revolution, The Making of an Activist Poet. This is her first visit to Pratt. It is an honor and a pleasure to introduce Judy Grahn.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor and pleasure for me to be here. Be so well treated in New York City. I thought that I've heard that many of you are writers, maybe all of you are writers. This is a writing forum, so I immediately thought that I would read from 2 points of view, one content and the other form. So I'll interrupt the content a little bit to point out things about form, which is also informing me as I go along. And I'm realizing, well, I never really developed a voice. You're supposed to develop a voice. If you don't develop a voice, forget it. Your history. So I'm history. I never developed a voice. I do what Zappa did. I say, what is the content? What is it I want to say? And what is the form that would carry this in a way that I would like, or that would be meaningful or whatever. So I thought that I would start with Simple Revolution and just start way back when, as an 8-year-old or whatever, and where some of it came from, and then go into the poetry more. But I just have to say a little aside about that poem about I'm not a girl, I'm a hatchet. My favorite thing that anybody ever did with that was somebody at a reading came up to me with an embroidered dish towel, and that poem was on it. So I was born near Chicago, and my parents were working class people. My father worked as a cook most of his life. I was very fortunate that he loved poetry, and he gave me the great life-saving gift of it by reciting it and showing me how to read, speak, and hear it. He had these tiny little books. They were very, very plain, dating from 1919. And they were like little hymnals, but inside the covers were workers' voices that were speaking to ordinary people. So my father was active in the labor movement of the 30s. So this is poetry by Robert Service and Carl Sandburg. Sandburg had gone to the same school in Galesburg, Illinois as my father, and was also the son of Swedish immigrants, and also had the middle name of August. And like my father, he quit school after the 8th grade and traveled. Sandburg was a social democrat, and his work rang with the real needs of working people who did not yet have union protections of any kind. So his work was pre-revolutionary, right? He wrote of urban workers whose veins bled out and whose faces showed hunger and deprivation. But he was also optimistic about social change and understood the pride that workers have or want to have in their work and in the place of their being and in the product they are making, no matter what the conditions. He used a heroic, oracular voice in some of his work, and I'm starting to hear that in mine. So my father, and here I am 8, read Sandburg's poem Chicago to me, and as a child, I too would read aloud in bold tones. Hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling. And the accumulative consonants would snap against my palate and resonate my ears with vibratory power of the words. But what were painted women under the gas lamps? And how were they related to stormy, rolling? Later, I would realize he meant storms of poverty and what they forced people to sell. I love Sandburg's attitude, the forthright descriptions, the pride, the working class content, people like my parents, and the formality. I loved, too, the poets taking on the voice of a whole city, a grand personification, a speaking in behalf of millions of people, and a rolling up of their singular occupations into metaphors of industry itself. How would a poet come to do that, I wondered? How much would he need to know? Did a moment arrive when he knew he was capable of speaking for so much? So in writing this memoir, it's, I refer to it as a multiple personality memoir because I'm using a lot of different voices, including interviewing some of the people who helped me form a movement that we call Gay Women's Liberation, and we formed that at the end of 1969, and then went on to found a number of institutions that were crucial to the women's movement. And so this little piece that I'm reading is, it's foreshadowing. It's what people do in novels. So I decided to do that. So it's a foreshadowing of a political event that's going to happen way toward the end of the book. I don't have no idea if this works or not, but I tried it. We have to go to the press right now. Something very bad has happened. We've been vandalized. I looked up, startled at the urgency in my lover's face as she burst into the living room. The press was on Market Street in Oakland. The year was 1977. I felt numb and unreal as we walked through the factory-sized plant we had so painstakingly built up. The other press members were already inside the cavernous building. They walked with us through room after room, showing us the devastation, the blood drain from their faces. We stepped carefully over thick trails of black ink. The gooey stuff pooled on stacks of freshly printed books and saturated our precious papers. A wide early production, a wide heap of shredded graph paper and film, 2 feet high, lay outside the darkroom we had built. And these were the early production stages of 6 books. The black rollers of our printing presses, usually gleaming, were covered in abrasive grainy powder. Who did this? Everyone had a different idea, but all agreed it was a violent attempt to annihilate our enterprise, the largest women's press in the country. We stared at each other. We talked fast. Was it the FBI? Was it cops? How did they get past the alarm system? What should we do? My heart began to beat fast as my numbness flowed into heightened fear. Casey stepped forward. No matter who they are, they might come back. We have to guard our plant. They might set fire to it next time, someone else said, ratcheting up the tension. We have a rifle and a pistol, Casey said. We'll take turns staying up all night, 2 at a time. So the next night, I found myself in the darkened building, sitting side by side with my lover on a thin pallet. We shivered on the cold cement floor, staring at the dancing shadows of the leaves through the skylight, waiting for something more sinister to show its face. I wondered how, after I had given up guns, decided that violence did not suit our revolution at all. How was it that I held a rifle across my lap? So that's the bit of foreshadowing. And this is talking about language, how language has changed. This is how I won my first lover in a poker game. And this now, the year is 1958, or 1959, might be 1959. And we're 18 and 19 years old. Yvonne, and it's New Mexico, and nobody ever uses the word lesbian, ever, although it is in the dictionary. Yvonne Mary Robinson and I always joked that we had won each other in a card game. We met during a Christmas break that I was spending with a schoolmate who was from the same town as her. The first day I caught sight of her, she was on her way to the Catholic Church with her mother. The next night, we met for a game of cards. The small northern New Mexico town of Springer was having one of its coldest winters, but the heat our threesome put out in that little country outbuilding, playing poker at a tiny table under a bare bulb, could have overcome glaciers. Vaughn was wearing a black cowboy hat, white shirt, pressed Levi's. I too had pressed Levi's, a snap-button shirt, and beautifully tooled black cowboy boots that belonged to my brother. I was just trying to fit in with these rural and therefore more authentic New Mexicans, but they of course knew I had never spent more than 2 hours on the back of a horse. I learned that night that Yvonne Mary Robinson was a real cowboy who had raised her own horses and competed in rodeos. My attraction to her was instantaneous and also alarming. Was she like me? Was she a lesbian? How could I tell? I couldn't just ask her, so how would I know how she felt toward me? Fortunately, Vaughn took the lead. There are always a couple of jokers in the deck, she said. My ears paid attention suddenly, as there was only one joker in the deck we were playing with. I'm a joker myself, she said, dealing cards. As we sat across from each other at the little table, her friend's expression grew puzzled when we continued joking over the cards, each clutching 5 of them. Joker is wild, I said, watching Vaughn's face, gratified when she guffawed because we weren't playing with the joker card. 2 of a kind is what I'm looking for, she ventured, scrutinizing her cards. We smoked skinny little cigars and played for a while. Then she eyed me and threw 2 cards down face up. Pair of queens. Her dark eyes asked a question, and her rosebud mouth seemed ready to turn this into a meaningless joke, if needed. She was asking me to dance with her in the air. Pair of queens wins every time, I rejoined. Aces are the highest card, a friend protested. Vaughn, sensing a bond forming, laughed nervously, too hard, choked out, pair of queens beats a straight flush. Which, of course, it doesn't. I didn't understand all of her jokes, but there was no mistaking the erotic mischief in her eyes, that these jokes had to do with being lesbians, and that her attention was fixed on me and I was reciprocating. My 18-year-old heart thundering under my snap-button shirt. So the last night of my visit, she managed to get away from her family and take me for a ride in a pickup truck. Driving down a back road under a brilliant December moon, she cut off the headlights. The cab filled with the misty, altered state of falling in love. I had always wondered what that was like, and here it was. We were floating down a ribbon of road in some other world. And when she stopped the truck for our first kiss, I knew I would do anything to be with her. But that was not going to happen. There was no, we tried for 8 years, but there was just no social structure that would support a teacher and a poet being together. And my dedication to poetry was just, I guess you would say, it's my first bond with the world. So that's where it stayed in me, and I needed the freedom to be a poet, and she needed society to change completely in order for her to be an out lesbian as a school teacher. So that conflict broke us up pretty quickly after 8 years, as I say. And after I had joined service and gotten kicked out as a lesbian, which I won't read you pieces of it, I've written about it in a couple of books now. And those days are now over for military people in some ways. In other ways, it remains very, very difficult to be out and gay in a military context. But the military threw me out, and I was then incarcerated in the barracks for 3 months, and nobody was to speak to me, which was a very profound experience of social ostracism. And when I did get out, I was the lowest of the low, and even went to a psychiatrist for a while until I realized if he's sanity, I'll be insanity. Because it was, I couldn't change myself in the ways that we wanted. And that radicalized me so that I became courageous, and even more courageous after getting encephalitis a little while longer, nearly dying, and whatever happened to me over in that world, I was re-instructed to be a courageous out lesbian poet at the age of 26. So from there, I founded this movement, as I said. So I hooked up with a New Yorker, thank you very much, who had been raised as a red diaper baby, and we connected in New Mexico, and then Yellow Springs, and then in San Francisco. So we actually started the movement. Though prior to that, I need to tell you, I had marched for gay civil rights in the first march that was held by Mattachine Society in 1965 in Washington, D.C. in front of the White House. And there were, I think, all of 13 of us at that moment. So I have been around for a while to see what all is going on. And while my press was vandalized and so on, and there were confrontations with the FBI and so on, it's just all seems to be part of what it means to be an activist, doesn't it? Because out of ashes comes the phoenix afterwards. So this is a piece of what it was like when we founded. We separated as women and then as lesbians out of this a very powerful set of leftist movements in the 60s and 70s, and where women were just simply taken for granted, and became more and more upset about that, and used the liberation movement impulse to change it. So in doing that, we were fortunate that rents were cheap, and so we founded households, and it's those households that made the movement possible. Well, I can't tell you how housebound or workbound and silent women were at that time. It's indescribable. Really, you can watch Mad Men and get a tiny idea, but really and truly, it was just so oppressive. And women weren't talking to each other, which is always alarming. When people aren't talking to each other, when workers aren't talking to each other, when immigrants aren't talking to each other, when people across boundaries aren't talking to each other, it's alarming. So we got together and began to talk, but our movement being, we identified as dykes and as dyke warriors. So we had a language beyond the joker in the car deck. We could say the word dyke and endlessly quibble about what in the world might it mean. But one thing we were certain it meant was that it was Amazon warriors in behalf of the entire world. That we were going to change society in behalf of getting rid of racism, in behalf of ecological justice, social justice for everybody, socialism, and gender equity, and to describe what is it to be transgender in any kind of way. We began that dialogue and we were very public about it. So this is a beginning of that. This is the first, we held an all-women's dance as the first action that we did in Berkeley. And poetry readings were connected to this. So one organizer, Kathy Kay, recently said the poets would read, and the poetry somehow united us as a community. And then we would all dance together. Women-only dances were happening in New York and Boston at the same time, indicating that lesbians were on the move outside the bar scenes that had trapped us in alcoholism, may I say. A communal erotic beat took hold of us. We began to dance with whoever was there, not as a flirtatious arrangement, but as a soaking up and spreading of a new, exhilarating vibrational rate. The guarded quality of our life fell away for a while. We saw each other anew. In that first rush of sexual solidarity, we saw each other as a group of warriors, gay women's liberation's handsome warriors. We saw each other and we liked what we saw. Having been told so often, so many ways, how ugly we lesbians were, how plain, how old-maidish, how no man would want you, how criminal, unwomanly, undesirable, dishonorable, disorderly, filthy, man-hating, whorish, inhuman, insanely jealous, and just yucky we were in our very existence. We were astonished to discover our collective beauty. I was not the only one to experience ecstatic exuberance and all-encompassing, heart-opening desire at the women's dances. To feel again, as I had at earlier times, but never this strongly, swept up in a river of sheer beauty. Sexy, powerful, gorgeous, clit distending, nipple raising, lip swelling, hair shaking, spit flowing, tongue glowing, eye flashing, rotating, knee twisting, thigh pumping, pheromone coursing, fingers expressing, sultry, spicy, sweat smelling, complexly exhilarating female potentiality. We raised up storms of change with our dancing, not because we were dancing, but because our dancing celebrated our commitment to each other. Aesthetics begins with erotic love. And now, because we had a viable movement, we had an aesthetic. We had beauty and courage and loyalty toward each other and toward ourselves. We had hot, hot desire, tongue-dangling, nipple-aching, consurging desire that seemed to start as a hunger in our blood, a pulse pain in our hearts. And what was it for? What was it for? What were we going to do with it? That was our question. And that was a question also that, that Wendy had asked me in one of my run-on sentences about poetry and myself as a poetry person and myself as a poet and myself writing poetry and myself doing poetry. She said, I'd have to ask you a question. What do you do it for? What do you do it for? And that bumped me into a new consciousness that art didn't necessarily, that it could go beyond being a gift or something the muse dropped on you. It could go beyond being a ticket out of here, wherever here is. It could go beyond ways to get attention. You're shy about talking. It could actually be intentional, have purposeful, intentional meaning. And this flies in the face of what is said. You must, A, have a voice that's always the same voice. B, never be overtly political in your poetry. You'll be polemical. So I've broken both of those rules. Not intentionally, but just coming out of who I developed into as a person and the necessity to be an activist, not to save the world, but to save myself as part of the world. And that necessitated committing to a lot of different aspects of activism in the course of my life that are inclusive of being gay, but that's not the only thing I do. I'm interested in lots of other things as well. So I hope that's a piece of a simple revolution, and what is simple about the revolution. And I used a metaphor in this book. It's a complicated book, and it's to put together. I don't know how it is to read it, but to put it together took me a lot of years, 20 years probably. Interviewing people and then absorbing what they had to say and then trying to do something poetic with what they were doing. And by poetic, I use it in the broadest possible imaginable way. But I also used a metaphor for what do I mean by a simple revolution. And that metaphor is the wind. So there's pieces of the wind that are described, and I came to understand why I was so intrigued by the wind only toward the end of writing it. And that is that if you put your nose to the wind, you're doing something intuitive and not just following the Marxists, following the socialists, following the party line of the day, of what is said to be what's needed, but rather to step outside of that, to say, yes, we'll be active, we'll be activists, and we'll make use of this impulse to be activists and analyze society for what is needed for our generation. And every generation has to do that. But we're also going to put noses to the wind to say, okay, this is going the right direction. Do I really want to be sitting here with a rifle across my lap? Is that really going to get me someplace? Do I really want to go, as we did, and capture some fellow that a friend had said had raped her and we were going to tie him to the judge's tree? Is that really going to further Inez Garcia's rape case, that's going to put rape on the table for Americans to really take a look at? So those kinds of questions come up in the course of this, okay? All right.
Thank you.
So I don't want to use up all the time, and I can talk forever. I want to read some of the poems, and again, to talk about forms. So I think if I were to describe voice, it would be that it's eclectic. And those of you who are writing, you're working with forms. You're breaking them, or you're making up new ones, or you're wondering what they're for, and how do they stifle, do they work well? So this is, I'll start with a form that I began working with. Somebody needs to keep me timed.
Yeah, I am.
Sorry.
You've comfortably about 14 more minutes. If we
I
want
have
to
14 more minutes?
have a good question and answer time, yeah.
Okay. So this is a sonnet form. And it's filling a need to express a working class life. It's called Ella in a Square Apron Along Highway 80. She's a copper-headed waitress, tired and sharp-worded. She hides her bad round tooth behind a wicked smile and flicks her ass out of habit to fend off the past that passes for affection. She keeps her mind the way men keep a knife, keen to strip the game down to her size. She has a thin spine, swallows her eggs cold, and tells lies. She slaps a wet rag at the truck drivers if they should complain. She understands the necessity for pain, turns away the smaller tips out of pride, and keeps a flask up at the counter. Once, she shot a lover who misused her child. Before she got out of jail, the courts had pounced and given the child away. Like some isolated lake, her flat blue eyes take care of their own stark bottoms. Her hands are nervous, curled, ready to scrape. The common woman is as common as a rattlesnake. So in that poem, I'm using an image of the snake and aiming everything in the poem toward that. And then ending with a line, and I wrote 7 of these, they all end with that same line. So it's a series of takeoffs on the sonnet form, and it was making use of visual imagery. Those, they spread all over the place, and it was really gratifying that women were making such a use of them. But I didn't want to keep writing in that same way, so I decided to go in a rhythmic direction as the next thing that I did, and this was about 3 years later. So I wrote a set of poems called the She Who poems, and to change the rhythm, I changed the way I was moving. As a tip, if I would start off on my left foot, now I would start off on my right foot. If I never skipped, now I would skip. If I didn't move my hips, now I was moving my hips, now my shoulders, now this, now that, until I was moving entirely differently and listening to rhythms of speech. So here's one of the poems that came out of that. It's 10 lines with 2 words. She who. She who. She who she. Who she who. She who. She who. She who she. Who she. She who. She who. She who. She who. She who. She who she. Who she. Who she. Who she. She who. She who. She who. She who. Another example, a limerick. Parting on the left, parting on the right, braiding. So you can see it has a sort of a female component to it, braided hair. And this one is also rhythmic. She who increases what can be done, I shall grow another breast in the middle of my chest. What shall it be? Not like the other ones lying there, those 2 fried eggs. In the center of my flesh, I shall grow another breast, rounder than a ready fist, slippery as a school of fish, sounder than stone. Call it she who educates my chest. She who, she is not my daughter, not my son. I'm going to groom her with my tongue, needle her senses with my pain, feed her hunches with my brain. She who defends me. That's a piece of that one. And so I went on with these. There are 32 of them, and they did pretty well. I liked what they were doing, but I wanted something more. I wanted something that I thought of as, I didn't think of it as political, but it really is political. But then what's not political? That's what I keep coming back to. Aren't everything I've done so far is political, right? Isn't that true? I mean, you could argue that. But I, nevertheless, was listening a lot to all the different movements and thinking, well, it's my responsibility to not just dance off the edge of the cliff with all the women lovers, but to take some responsibility for other human beings. So a woman is talking to death grew out of that testimony in trials that never got heard. And it's a narrative poem, but it uses a number of different voices in it. My lover's teeth are white geese flying above me. My lover's muscles are rope ladders under my hands. We were driving home slow, my lover and I, across the Long Bay Bridge one February midnight. When midway over in the far left lane, I saw a strange scene. One small young man standing by the rail, and in the lane itself, parked straight across as if it could stop anything. A large young man upon a stalled motorcycle, perfectly relaxed as if he'd stopped at a hamburger stand. He was wearing a pea coat and Levi's, and he had his head back, roaring. You could almost hear the laugh. It was so real. Look at that fool, I said, in the middle of the bridge like that. A very womanly remark. Then we heard the meaning of the noise of metal on a concrete bridge at 50 miles an hour, and the far left lane filled up with a big car that had a motorcycle jammed on its front bumper, like the whole thing would explode. The friction sparks shot up bright orange from many feet into the air, and the racket still sets my teeth on edge. When the car stopped, we stopped parallel, and Wendy headed for the call box, while I ducked across those 6 lanes like a mouse in a bowling alley. Are you hurt? I said. The middle-aged driver had the grayest black face. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. What happened? Then I remembered. Somebody, I said, was on the motorcycle. I ran back. 1 block, 2 blocks. The space for walking on the bridge is maybe 18 inches. Whoever engineered this arrogance, in the dark, stiff wind, it seemed I would be pushed over the rail, would fall down screaming onto the hard surface of the bay. But I did not. I found the tall young man who thought he owned the bridge, now lying on his stomach, head cradled in his broken arm. He had glasses on, but somewhere he had lost most of his Levi's. Where were they? And his shoes. 2 short cuts on his buttocks, that was the only mark, except his thin white seminal tubes were all strung out behind. No child left in him, and he looked asleep. I plucked wildly at his wrist and put it down. There were 2 long-haired women holding back the traffic just behind me with their bare hands. The machines came down like mad bulls. I was scared, much more than usual. I felt easily squished, like the earthworms crawling on a busy sidewalk after the rain. I wanted to leave, and met the driver walking back. The guy is dead. I gripped his hand. The wind was going to blow us off the bridge. Oh my God, he said. Haven't I had enough trouble in my life? He raised his head and for a second was enraged and yelling at the top of the bridge. I was just driving home. His head fell down. My God, and now I've killed somebody. So that's the opening of that poem. It has other pieces, other voices. blessed to stay at our house. I was allowed to go 3 places growing up, she said, 3 places, no more. There was a straight line from my house to school, a straight line from my house to church, a straight line from my house to the corner store. Her parents thought something might happen to her, but nothing, ever, did. So those are some poems, some excerpts from poems. I think that we can address some questions at this point. So if people are thinking of making any of this.
Our wonderful Jennifer will
Moderating
moderate and answer.
I just wanted to start out by giving the greatest thanks to Judy Grahn. I, like Rachel Levitsky, am so thrilled out of my skin to have this incredible artist and intellectual and activist and woman of immense courage who's inspired so many hundreds and thousands of women and dykes and activists and people of all kinds across the world. So we are just so honored to have you here, and I just thank you so very much. I'm only sad that I don't have my 1984 copy of Another Mother Tongue here to have you but before I go on and on, let's open it up and see if anybody has questions. Do you want to sit on this white thing here, or do you want to stay seated?
I'm good. I'm okay.
First question? Yeah.
I always ask the same thing. Were there people of color in in this world? And you mentioned racism, so it leads me to think there was probably some color.
Oh, totally. There was a lot of color, and it's not been talked about. No, it has not been. On the West Coast, a picture of our press in 1965 would show around a group around the press. There were 2 Jewish women from New York City. There was an African-American woman who was close friends with Audre Lorde, who worked with us for a while. There were 2 Asian women, one Korean American and one Filipina, and me in that group. There were other women related to that. It was a particularly multicultural day, I must say, that particular photograph, but nevertheless, it exemplifies. And a person that I teamed up with early on had been in the Black Panther movement. Her name is Pat Parker. They're going to put a collection of her work out now. And she, what a fireball, and what a privilege to know her. She passed in 1989, just a big activist, very motivational to our movement, kept us honest in many ways, kept us on our toes. But there were lots of other people who were active. There were African-American women with Olivia, putting their songs out and so on. But I called it a simple revolution from one of Parker's poems. We all call it Parker. In which she said, her poem is, I've placed myself in many movements, in the Maoist movement, in Huey Newton's movement, in Angela Davis's movement, in Fidel Castro's movement, but now I'm speaking as myself. I just want to walk down the street and not have black men make fun of me, and not have white bikers beat me up, and not have ladies in the restroom freak out that I'm in a restroom and looking to them like a man. What I want is a simple revolution. So, or she didn't say that, but she said, I have a dream too, and it's a simple dream. So from that, I said, I get it. We made a simple revolution, and it's a revolution based in what is needed today, what is needed, not somebody's theoretical idea about what is needed. It may be somebody's theoretical idea about tactics, but for what is needed, you are the only one who knows that, because you're the one who knows where the problems are in your life and the lives of your friends. So your revolution will come out of that, I'm saying. Just saying.
Just saying. And in this book, A Simple Revolution, Judy Grahn really does go into a lot of the politics of collaborative work or work between movements, with specifically Black Panthers and gay liberation movements. Sort of,
Yeah.
you really did unearth a lot of that history and bring that out for us to read. Yeah. Is there another question in the room?
What's your opinion on the decision in the Navy to allow women on submarines? My brother is a submariner, and he's under the impression that assault and harassment, and also just sex, which is not okay on a military submarine, will happen if women are allowed. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, or to draw from.
I don't really, I don't know. When I was in the military, we had to do guard rounds every night, ostensibly to keep the Russians from breaking in. This is in Washington, D.C. In reality, it was to keep the American soldiers from breaking in, because there were always guys who would slit the screen and try to come into our barracks. Crazed men who need to be brought under control, and I don't know what that means. I don't know enough about that situation, but it really sounds fractious to me. But people are brave, and they go out into frontier areas and they try things out. So there are women in combat, and I'm like, oh God. But I was one who wanted to be in combat myself when I was 18. Wow.
What? Why?
Because I thought it was a way to assert myself in the world and be a good person. It takes a while to figure out how to be a good person in your life, each life. Right? So I don't have an opinion about it. I probably would if I knew somebody in a situation.
Yeah.
Hi, you said at one point that,
Say your name for the record.
oh, I'm Lulu, hi.
Hello.
So you said erotic love is the beginning of every aesthetic, and I'm really interested in how, following that idea that erotic love is the beginning of an aesthetic, how right now is that useful in bridging so many gaps that are growing between so many important groups and so many individuals' simple revolutions?
Yeah, interesting idea, huh? The idea of that actually comes from India, and I'm not remembering the name of the man who put it together, the various ideas about aesthetics, about beauty. Beauty, I think, is central to revolution, to social change. And the erotic piece of it is it can take so many different forms. It can be how you love a tree and how you pay attention to that when you touch a tree, it responds. So this morning I touched a tree on your campus, and the tree gave me a little buzz back. So because I'm attuned to that from being influenced by the Asian methods for doing this that have impacted people, especially in the west coast of this country, that I have this awareness. So it's a broad thing. Audrey talked about it first, publicly, the uses of the erotic. And she had a metaphor. In World War II, margarine would come in this pasty, lager paste looking white, you don't know, white blob of stuff. And you put yellow dye in it and stir it up to make it look like butter. But her image is the right one, that eroticism diffuses, it suffuses everything. that is through us. You know, it's in our toes. It's in our relationship with the shoe on the ground. You know, it's everywhere. If we let that feeling happen, and it's an openness. So between groups, does this mean, oh, everyone runs and has sex? No. It means that you open your heart to particular kinds of love that encompass beauty and lifefulness and so on. And you engage at that level because it's a level beyond politics. It's a level that is heart to heart. So that's a thought I have. Somebody else might have a different.
Judy, I have a follow-up. Oh, thanks. I have a follow-up to that. That image in your memoir of the rifle across your lap, it's resonating huge right now with that. And I'm so curious to hear you speak about how you did manage to move out of that position of fear and you know, get rid of the gun.
You're curious about what about it?
I mean, you said that wasn't going to work for you, having the rifle there. Was it just that night?
If it was going to work, you would see me with a gun.
Yeah.
You know, this is about, you know, you use the methods that are actually going to work. You know, I think there are certain circumstances where that's what's happening. So, you know, a crazed chimpanzee is tearing your friend's face off. You have a gun to stop that. You use the gun to stop that. So, you know, recently I was reading about this. Europeans have guns. I forget where I was reading about this. It was about gun control. Europeans have more guns than Americans have. I think I have this right. Canadians certainly do. But they are regulated in ways that we don't. We have this mythic idea that somehow a gun is about freedom or power, that just out of the barrel of a gun comes power. Out of the barrel of a gun comes death. And if it's regulated, then you have this as some safety thing. I don't feel safe around them. I'm my biggest enemy. You know, who's more likely to blow my head off? Me. I am. Because I get into depression. So, you know, I was like, oh, safety first. Let's get this out of the house. Let's just don't keep it around as a pest, you know. Am I answering your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Judy, I have a question. Just how much time do we have?
We have, it's 1:38, so we have 12 minutes exactly,
okay,
is that right?
Well, this is a very, you know, grounded, practical question. I'm wondering, at this moment, what concerns, issues that you see around you, do you feel like you're drawn to as an activist and an artist, or that you'd like to, you know, where do you feel like you want to dig in these days? How does that interface with your work?
Well, I began digging into something. I took on the subject of menstruation because, after all, I'd already taken on lesbianism, several other things, all of which were shameful and horrible. And I started telling my students, if you're writing about women, you're going to be embarrassed and ashamed of yourself. So just get over it and do it anyway. That's the existential position of being female. Your body is never good enough. And especially in the eyes of other women, I think. So just dig in and do something. So menstruation. And so what a door I've opened with that, because menstrual rituals now have this whole idea that menstruation created the world. That so much culture is, and you can see it, it's like a cornucopia. You know what a cornucopia is? All this fruitfulness in a basket. In these rituals. So I'm understanding humanity as ritual beings, and I'm addressing our blood rituals, and we all have our blood stories. I think they're important, and I think there's a lot of content in them. So I'm working with that, and it's uphill. It was easier to come out as a dyke. It's, you know, it's probably the most contentious thing that I've taken on. My activist friends went, what? The world's coming apart, you're writing about menstruation. You know, or how that. But no, I'm really addressing human culture. And I'm addressing how women have participated in human culture. Why? Because that hasn't been addressed. And so it's missing. So I think that there are jewels of methods and jewels of ways of understanding human difference, for example, that women are sitting on, hiding away in these the cultural contents of practices. And I think that that can be brought to the surface, and that's what I'm doing, and my students also doing it.
It's
Neat
I
job.
can't wait. I'm so excited
Yeah.
to even hear about it.
Well, look
And
at
so
the
much-
journal online, Metaforma
Okay,
Journal
okay.
online. And there's one piece in there called
Metaformia.
METAFORMIA. And there's one fellow, Gregory Gages, if you're interested in how would gayness fit with this. That's in there. And I'm waiting for the men and men's blood stories, which are equally important, equally formative of culture, but related in this way by this almost unspeakable subject of blood. Amazing. Yeah, that is.
Do we have time for one more with Rachel?
One more, is that
Rachel?
okay?
Yes.
I realize I misspoke.
Yeah, no, we have to at 1:50.
Okay. Some of my freshman English people are still here, and we've been talking in class about the sort of overload of stuff and information and connectivity and anxiety in this time, and how one might even begin to conceive of action, and how one might. I mean, you've addressed so much of that. Like how do you know what to prioritize? How do you know what to put to the top when you're? Is it you sort of feel the wind? I think you address it, but I was just wondering if you could sort of speak to that, speak to the sort of the overwhelmedness on the person coming, the overwhelmed experience of being an 18-year-old right now.
Well, yeah, because there's a new technology. I think my parents were overwhelmed by radios. I think certain cultures have been really overwhelmed by radios, and all of a sudden zealots get on the radio and we command them, and they go and do it. You know, like, you know, zombies, obedience people of some kind or another. That's been formative of a lot of violence in our time. As human beings, we have to get used to the new media as it comes along, and books are being replaced by a screen very rapidly, have been already for 18-year-olds. So this is about adaptation, and try not to get swept away, because there's always bad elements to anything new that's going on, and one of those is attention deficit, right? That it just you can't concentrate anymore. So exercises in concentrating are very good. One neat way to do that is to take up cooking and chewing. I tell my friends this, because they eat too fast. Then just like, they're like my dog. I've timed my dog. It takes him 14 seconds to clean up his little plate of stuff. 14 seconds. Me, it takes an hour. Because my parents, fortunately, were very slow, and I'm very slow. And at our table, my parents had a table. They were very poor, but they had a table. They really believed in food. They really believed in talking about the food. They talked about it before they went to buy it. They knew exactly how much they were going to spend when they bought it. They talked about what part of life it had come from, the vine, the cow, the whatever, what part of the cow. They talked about the entire preparation. You had to be quiet when the cook was in the kitchen. You didn't just go in and gobble her head off or his head off. My dad, the cook. You arrange the plate just so. I will turn my plate around so that it's aesthetic. Is it erotic? Well, absolutely. It really is. And take your time. It's an exercise. How to be slow. And when you're slow like that and you chew, you ground yourself. Because food is very grounding. And information is ungrounding. So your psyche is going off in too many directions. You want to bring it back. Carry a stone in your pocket. Think about stones. Think about your food. Eat root vegetables. What more can I say?
Maybe that's Final word, eat more vegetables.
Thank you so much.